All right, let's dive into one of the most transformative periods in history, the 19th century. Now, you might think of steam engines and factories, but there was another revolution going on, one that was all about the printed word. We're talking about an explosion of print that created brand new readers, incredible new machines, and yeah, it fundamentally changed the world.
So, to really get to the heart of this, we need to start with one single massive question. What happens when millions and millions of people learn how to read, all at basically the same time? The answer to that is the incredible story we're about to unpack.
What happened was a massive reading boom. It was like a perfect storm of rising literacy, new technology, and just this incredible demand. Think of it like a flywheel. A huge new hunger for reading material fueled amazing technological innovation, and that new technology made print cheaper and easier to get, which, you guessed it, created even more readers. Let's break down how this whole thing got started.
So who exactly were all these new readers? You gotta remember, before the 19th century, reading was mostly for the wealthy, the elites and the clergy. But all of that was about to change. A massive new audience was waking up and they were hungry for knowledge, for stories, and for new ideas.
This wasn't just one single group either. It was more like three distinct, powerful armies of readers all marching onto the scene at once: children, women, and workers. And together, they created a demand for printed stuff that the world had simply never seen before.
Let's start with kids. As primary education suddenly became compulsory, you had an entire generation learning to read. Boom! A massive new market is born. A dedicated children's press pops up in France, and school textbooks become a huge industry. But what's really fascinating is how print didn't just preserve culture, it actually changed it. When the Grimm brothers collected their famous folktales, they edited them, basically cleaning them up and removing anything considered vulgar or not suitable for children in the upper classes. So the fairy tales we all know today, they are a direct product of this 19th century filter.
Next up, women. The novels of the 19th century were absolutely crucial in shaping this cultural idea we now call the new woman. And this wasn't just a character in a book. It was a powerful vision of a woman with her own will, a strong personality, and the power to think for herself.
Women became a powerhouse audience. They were targeted by everything from cheap penny magazines to housekeeping guides. But here's the crucial part. They weren't just consumers of print. They became some of the era's most important creators. Think about it. Novelists like Jane Austen, the Bronte sisters, George Eliot, they weren't just writing good stories. They were actively shaping and defining this new woman for millions of readers.
And that brings us to our third army of readers: workers. Just take a second to read this quote from Thomas Wood, a mechanic from Yorkshire. It's just so powerful. It captures this intense, burning desire for knowledge. Can you imagine reading by firelight because you can't even afford a candle? That just shows you the incredible motivation people had.
So how did they do it? Well, lending libraries were a game changer, making books affordable. And as the workdays slowly got shorter, people finally had a little time for self-improvement. And just like we saw with women, workers quickly went from being just readers to becoming writers themselves. They started penning their own political pamphlets and autobiographies, adding their voices to the public conversation for the very first time. It's a struggle that authors like Maxim Gorky would later document in their own incredible works. Okay, so we've got these three massive new audiences, all demanding more books, more newspapers, more magazines. The old hand presses couldn't possibly keep up. So let's shift gears and look at how technology absolutely raced to meet this incredible new demand.
The pace of innovation was just relentless. It started small, with a shift to sturdier metal presses in the late 1700s, but then came the real game changer in the mid-1800s, the power-driven cylindrical press. Instead of a flat plate, it used a rotating cylinder, making it way, way faster. By the late 19th century, offset presses made vivid color printing a reality, and by the early 20th century, electricity was just supercharging the whole operation.
And just to give you a sense of the sheer scale of this leap, Richard M. Hoe's press in New York could print 8,000 sheets in a single hour. 8,000! This wasn't just a small improvement, it was a total transformation. This machine is what made the mass circulation daily newspaper possible.
And it wasn't just about raw speed. A whole bunch of other, smaller improvements totally changed the final product. You had better ways to feed paper into the machine, higher quality printing plates, and automatic reels that streamlined the whole process. New photoelectric controls made sure that colors lined up perfectly, making illustrations just pop off the page.
All these little things came together to make printed texts look sharper and more professional than anyone had ever seen before.
So, now you can print thousands of books and papers every hour. Great. The next big problem is, how do you sell them all? Mass production demanded mass marketing. Publishers had to get creative and invent entirely new ways to sell a story to this brand new, diverse audience.
And they were incredibly inventive. First, they mastered serialization, releasing big novels chapter by chapter in magazines. This was basically the 19th century version of a TV show cliffhanger, keeping readers hooked and making sure they bought the next issue. Then you had cheap collections, like the popular Shilling series, which bundled well-known works at an affordable price. And finally, driven by the economic disaster of the Great Depression, publishers introduced the revolutionary cheap paperback, putting books directly into the hands of millions who could never afford them before.
This era also gave us a simple but brilliant innovation we all totally take for granted today, the book jacket. You know, before the 20th century, books had sturdy bindings but no disposable graphic cover. The book jacket turned that cover from simple protection into a little billboard, a crucial marketing tool designed to catch your eye in a crowded store.
And that was really the tipping point. Before the 1930s, books were still often seen as expensive, almost luxury items for a wealthy audience. But the sheer terror of declining sales during the Great Depression forced a revolution. Cheap paperbacks weren't just a smart business move, they were a democratizing force that made owning books possible for pretty much everyone.
So, the result of all this new technology and new business models, wasn't just more books on shelves. It was a world that was fundamentally reshaped by print. The printed word literally escaped the library and spilled out into the streets, changing our environment and, how we think.
By the 1870s, you couldn't get away from it. Public spaces were just covered in print. Advertisements, posters, notices, they were plastered on every wall, at every railway station, on public buildings. The world itself became a text you could read. And that text started shaping public opinion, what people bought, and even national identities, on a scale that was completely unprecedented.
And that really brings us to our final thought. This revolution from over 150 years ago laid the groundwork for our entire modern media landscape. The idea of a mass audience, of advertising, of serialized stories, of cheap paperbacks, that's all still with us. So the question I want to leave you with is this. How does that printed world, born in the 19th century, still shape what you see, what you think, and what you read today?